Here's a DawgNation special. Unmatched coverage of UGA in the postseason is brought to you by Pella Windows and Doors, Kroger, Cercheros, Georgia Spa Company, Circle K, Jittery Joe's Coffee, and the UGA Bookstore.
How much do you love to see that look back on a night that I think we're all going to remember for quite some time here, as Georgia gets the win in the SEC Championship 28-7 against the Alabama Crimson Tide last night. Great video by our guy Cody Chaffins to give you everything that you need on that. And to this morning, we get a chance to settle in, now afternoon, about to be afternoon, and take a look at something we've done now for a very long time. One of our special traditions around here, the day after the SEC Championship, we come in here, we take a look at what the college football playoff field looks like, and we get to do so today knowing full well that Georgia will be in that field. It is simply a matter of when it will play. We believe we know who it might play. We're about to find that out, and obviously we'll talk about how Georgia got there with that SEC Championship win last night. That's all throughout our program. Special guest here, too, DawgNation colleagues, Mike Griffith, Kaylee Manzel, Connor Riley, Jeff Sintel, all going to pop in here over the course of the next few minutes as we watch this college football playoff field announced. We are all over that here today. Obviously, away from Georgia, that's where the big drama is here right now. In two spots for this college football playoff bracket. At the bottom of the bracket, and this doesn't impact Georgia a ton, but at the bottom of the bracket, we're looking to see of those conference champions after Duke pulled the upset last night over Virginia, and now going as the ACC champion with 5 losses, not ranked in the top 25. It opens the door for 2 group of 5 teams that were ranked in the top 25 last week. James Madison, which won the Sun Belt Championship easily on Friday night, and Tulane, which beat North Texas in the American Athletic Conference Championship. You could have the possibility of 2 group of 5, or as they're now known, group of 6 teams that make the college football playoff. I will tell you, though, that prediction markets, if you care about that sort of thing, have moved in Duke's favor early this morning. Now, what's interesting about that is while Duke was not ranked by the College Football Playoff Top 25 Committee last week, we don't really know what they think about Duke necessarily. We do have at least some idea of where they would be ranked in the AP Top 25 as it stretches beyond where it is. Last week in the AP Top 25, James Madison, they were 19th last week, so solidly in the AP Top 25. If you look at the also receiving votes category, Duke's, barely top 40? So at least theoretically, and all of this is essentially a theoretical exercise, at least theoretically, if Duke were to move into the field, winning the ACC title last night in upset fashion over Virginia, they're essentially moving higher in one re-rank than almost any team ever has, at least theoretically, all on the basis of being the ACC champion. But the question is, can this committee really leave an ACC champion out? And then more relevant to Georgia, because this impacts who Georgia could eventually play, you've got the battle between Alabama 9th a week ago, Notre Dame 10th a week ago, BYU 11th a week ago, and Miami 12th a week ago for 2 at-large spots in this college football playoff field. Now, BYU easiest to eliminate because they were only 11th last week. After a loss, hard to imagine them moving up, which leaves 3 teams for 2 spots between Alabama, Notre Dame, and Miami. When it comes to Alabama, the overall argument is going to be that, you can't punish a team who played in Conference Championship Saturday. And listen, I'm an SEC guy. I think that generally speaking, I gravitate towards a pro-SEC argument. But here's what I want to tell you. I don't want to hear anybody whining about getting punished for playing in Conference Championship Saturday as if history began this weekend. Because Georgia fans, and listen, it was a different studio then, but it was the same show. On a Sunday morning, I am pounding my fist on the table, December of 2023, saying Georgia was undefeated going to the SEC Championship. They'd won 29 straight games. They lost to Alabama by a field goal. You can't leave them out of the playoff field. And at that time, nobody wanted to hear that argument on behalf of Georgia. So now this notion of you can't punish Alabama for playing in a conference championship game, while I'm very pro-SEC, where was that energy for Georgia when it was in the same situation in 2023? So frankly, as a Georgia fan, Alabama gets none of my sympathy. And if you want to know the honest truth, it'd be a pretty nice badge of honor for me, and a lot of Georgia fans feel the same way. It'd be pretty prideful for me. I'd feel pretty good about this if Georgia today could look back on last night, and we'll talk about this SEC championship game throughout our program. If you could look back on last night and say, yeah, Georgia ended Alabama's season. I got to tell you, even though it hurt the SEC, it'd feel pretty good for Georgia to be able to say, we sent the Crimson Tide packing. They'll still play in some meaningless bowl game, but we kept them out of the college football playoff. I think a lot of Georgia fans would feel that way. However, it's worth pointing out that Georgia coach Kirby Smart was far more sympathetic last night in talking about the grind of the SEC and this game for both Georgia and Alabama they came hobbled into. Kirby, as he says, got on a soapbox about what this means for the future of the SEC and how it perhaps impacts Alabama's playoff standing this year. This is what Kirby Smart said about that last night.
I'm going to jump on a soapbox now because I'm going to take your question and run with it, but I want to give you a hypothetical. Okay, that was the 9th game of our SEC schedule, right? So now just imagine that was the 9th game of the season for everybody in the SEC, and everybody played another SEC game. Now, I'm not saying it was on this week. I'm saying it was on a previous week. So that's 8 more losses, right? 16 teams. It's 8 more losses in our league. So 1 team, 2 teams. Let's say this last weekend it was Oklahoma and Ole Miss or whoever hadn't played yet. They played and they got losses. And then they're going to go to the SEC championship and play another game. Those 2 teams were beat up tonight, and that was the 9th game of the year. And we're looking at next year having another game. I mean, the coaches in our league are concerned about it, very concerned about it, and I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't speak my piece and say that it's concerning. Because if that game affects Alabama, I don't know if it will or not. I have no say-so in it. I've sat in those shoes many times where that game cost you an opportunity. But hypothetically, every team just played another game in their 9th game. So there's 8 more losses. Who just dropped out? All right, and then there's another game. SEC championship. It's tough. It was physical out there tonight, and they were wounded. We were wounded. I got a lot of respect. Noah Thomas tried to go. He had back spasms. He wasn't able to really go. We were without multiple guys on. I mean, you just beat up.
So strong argument there from Kirby Smart. And listen, every word that he says, I believe it's true, that the grind of the SEC is unlike any other league. Even, last night the Big Ten title game theoretically was number 1 versus number 2, but we still don't believe the rigor of a Big Ten schedule matches what the SEC does. So I think Kirby Smart's right to make the argument that he makes. I'm just saying it doesn't fall on with very much sympathy with me. I will be shedding no tears on behalf of Alabama on this, even though I understand what Kirby Smart's saying. I'll also say, and by the way, the TV show is coming on the air, so we're going to be watching this live as it plays out and then reacting to it with you and bringing on some special guests from DawgNation to help us do this. When it comes to these 3 teams vying for 2 at-large spots, assuming we eliminate BYU, I don't know that there is a true right answer. I think there are valid opinions expressed on behalf of probably all 3 teams. The Alabama argument, Kirby Smart does a good job of making that there. The Notre Dame argument, people have obviously a well-founded skepticism of Notre Dame throughout the years, but it's fair to point out, last year they did beat Georgia. This year, if you care about power ratings, I'm talking about ESPN, SP Plus, FPI, the other deep in the weed stuff like Massey Peabody, Sagarin, Brian Fremo, a lot of these math nerd type people, pretty much unanimously, Notre Dame is power rated higher than Miami. That is why, at least in theory, Notre Dame is ranked ahead of Miami, despite the fact that Miami beat it. So there is an argument for Notre Dame over Miami, even with Miami having the head-to-head win. My prediction, perhaps sure to be wrong, is that Alabama will be excluded and Notre Dame and Miami will both get in. That is my prediction. I do believe if it comes down to Miami and Notre Dame, now side by side, likely in these rankings, I think the committee will now say, even though week to week Notre Dame has been ranked ahead of Miami, I believe that Miami will go ahead of Notre Dame, I believe. And if you force me to pick right now, I believe that Alabama will be excluded. And it's also weird to me, and I don't know what this means. Maybe it means nothing. It is weird to me that Alabama is somehow the edge case, the outlier, the debated team every year. They were in 2023 when they made the playoff over undefeated Florida State. They were last year as a 3-loss team, left on the outside. They made the playoff in 2017, despite the fact they didn't even play for the SEC championship. Go back pre-college football playoff, even in, like, say, 2011, when they played in the BCS national championship game, when they didn't win the SEC, and they got a rematch against a team that had beat it earlier in the season, and they won the rematch and got a national championship. And that's not even me necessarily trying to take a dig at Alabama or anything like that. It's just an interesting observation that for as long as these very intense old school BCS, new school college football playoff debates, 4-team era, 12-team era, for whatever reason, it just seems like Alabama ends up being the edge case, the test case, the debated team, the controversial subject, 5 times at least in just the last 15 years alone? I think that's interesting. I think it's interesting that somehow it's always Alabama, and I do believe the backstory on that. Hey, last year they got excluded as a 3-loss team. Do they get the nod this year? 2023, they made it controversially. Does that work against them trying to make it in controversial fashion again this year? Gifted a couple of appearances when they weren't SEC champs in 2017, 2011. How much of a memory does the committee have on that before these rankings come out? Let me also let you hear Kalen DeBoer from last night. DeBoer, after Georgia had beat him down 28-7, the belts came out. We saw Christian Miller and Jordan Hall walking around with those leather straps after that game. DeBoer knew how beat up his team was on the field, but he was still arguing for them to make the college football playoff. This is what Kalen DeBoer said about that.
Well, I think you look at the games that we played throughout the season, but if you're really looking at this game, it was a 14-point game with 7.5 minutes to go. We had the ball. There you can look at things that didn't go well. We gave them 4 short fields. And again, I don't want to take anything away from what Georgia did, right? The field position battle is part of it. But gave them 4 short fields. That's a testament to our defense being resilient. And, one of those touchdowns, if we're really worried about the score, then probably punt it on your own 11, right? But I'm here to win an SEC championship. I'm not here to, if you lose by 1 or you lose by more, it's still a loss. And that's what I was caring about. We're here to win an SEC championship. We can't get worried about how much did we lose by or that was what it was about. And we're here to win. That's how we play. And again, it was a 14-point game. We have the ball with 7.5 minutes to go, against a really good team that knows us well and we know them well. I thought our defense did a heck of a job going against them. One thing that we didn't really do was take the ball off them, and the one turnover they got helps up, and again, a short field. So again, that's football. But that's the way I looked at this game. And if this game applies to and takes away from our resume, I don't think that's right. I really don't. I think the precedent's been set, and I don't know how you can go into a conference playoff game when you're the number 1 seed and did all these things throughout the year, and playing in this game against one of the top teams in the country as well, how that can hurt you and keep you out of the playoff when, again, we've done what we've done all year.
So that's the argument that Kalen DeBoer tried to make last night, essentially suggesting that maybe the game was closer than the final margin of victory suggests, because at various times during the game, Alabama at least still had a chance. The problem you're going to run into is, and we lost our TV feed in here, the problem you're going to run into is that Alabama was completely shut down by the Georgia defense, completely shut down. That Alabama was held to, -3 rushing yards last night. It was an unbelievable day for the Georgia defense, and a night and day change from where it was the previous game in September, when Alabama converted seemingly every 3rd down that it wanted, and obviously had that great success early on. This time it was Georgia. They got after Ty Simpson all night. That completely throttled the Alabama rushing game. That was the thing I think the committee's going to notice, that Alabama could not move the football at all against Georgia. And frankly, that's the Crimson Tide's problem. But for us, who are Georgia fans, feeling great today about an SEC championship, that's something that we're going to celebrate. And we loved what Kirby Smart said last night, really touting the way in which his defense did feel the extra motivation to come in and show exactly what it's all about. Before we get this top 25 and find out, exactly officially when Georgia will play and where it's seated, let's hear Kirby Smart talking about this Georgia defense.
Oh, it was a huge difference. It was it was a domination on that side of the ball, and a lot of it came with a chip on their shoulder from the last one, and it came on a chip on their shoulder from improving. We told them after that game that there wasn't a lack of execution in that game at home. They outplayed us, they out-executed us, they probably outcoached us. And we weren't going to let that happen again in terms of the way we played with physicality. They're getting better. Young kids are growing up. There's a lot of naysayers out there for Schumann and his staff, and they never flinched. They kept getting better, kept growing the players, and they played really well tonight.
So a very strong argument from Kirby Smart on behalf of his defense, and because it played so well, and really that's become the story of this team. Tech coming into that game, that was basically a top 5 offense in America, a top 20 scoring offense in America, and Georgia kept them out of the end zone the entire game. What it did against Texas, that was an offense that was playing pretty well by the end of the season, not against Georgia. This Georgia defense has emerged. And my gosh, y'all, watching guys like Quintavious Johnson flying around, I don't know how many players I've seen improve over the course of a season as much as Q has. It's almost like you see him doing what he did last night. For those of you who follow Major League Baseball or something like that, it's almost like he's a trade deadline acquisition. It's almost like Georgia has added a player during the year. Quintavious always had promise, and I think Georgia began this season believing he would make good on some of his potential. But goodness gracious, he's everywhere, deflecting passes in Ty Simpson's face. He is all over the place. It's almost like a new player that Georgia has added because of how much he's improved. Ellis Robinson,
check 1 2.
I thought in pass coverage, Ellis Robinson was terrific last night. Georgia's got some of these players who have just emerged over the course of the year, and the entire defense has risen because of that. It sounds like we may be having a special guest getting ready to join us here. We'll get ready to hear that. Let me also just mention this before we do. So if you're looking for the impact that all of this, Georgia's win and everything happening around it, could have on Georgia, ranked number 3 last week, we believe they have a chance to move up as high as number 2. And one of the things I'm going to be curious to hear from Georgia fans today is how much of a difference that really makes. It's the potential of playing 2-7 as opposed to 3-6 in a quarterfinal type situation. I don't think that's a wild degree of difference. It wouldn't change where Georgia plays. In all likelihood, Georgia's going to be in the Sugar Bowl. That'll be officially announced here in a moment. But it would be a nice cachet to say that the committee was paying attention to how forceful Georgia's win was, now moving up again as a number 2 seed. There is the potential of that. I don't believe they'll be lower than 3. So you're looking at a 2-3 situation, which means in a theoretical national semifinal, you'd be slated to play Ohio State no matter what, assuming both Georgia and the Buckeyes keep winning. So that's what it could be for Georgia. As high as a number 2, as low perhaps as a number 3. I don't believe they would fall to number 4. And for the most part, almost rubber stamped into the Sugar Bowl. On ESPN television, they're taking their lap around all the various hot spots right now, including Tuscaloosa, Alabama, where Marty Smith, fresh off his embedding in Oxford, Mississippi for Lane Kiffin watch, is now in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, looking to see what's going to happen with the Crimson Tide. So when this top 25 starts coming out, we'll give it to you, including the controversy at the bottom of the rankings and at the bottom of the at-large bids. We'll give all that to you in a moment and officially announce where it is that Georgia will be playing. For now, though, let's bring in Mike Griffith. Mike, let me start on the Georgia part of this. I do think there is a chance that Georgia moves up to number 2. I think there's also a chance they stay at number 3. I don't know that I think that matters all that much for Georgia. It's a potential semifinal game against Ohio State either way. Georgia would be slated to face them in a 2-3 game, just depending on what color uniform you'd be wearing. And I just think this field is so bunched together. I don't know that there's a wild degree of difference between the 6 and the 7 seed. And frankly, if you're thinking about a 9 and a 10 playing a 6 and a 7, I think you've even got some bunch up right there. This is one of those years when I'm not quite so sure how much seeding overall matters once you determine who gets the byes and who gets the home games. So I'll start with this. Where do you think Georgia will be seeded, and how much do you think the 2 compared to the 3 probably makes a difference, if any at all?
Well, I think ultimately you're right. You got to go through Ohio State, right? Because Ohio State or Georgia, they're going to be 2 or 3. I think Georgia 2. I think you got to add some value to championship games. I mean, why play them if you're not going to reward a team for winning one? And yeah, Ohio State missed a field goal, but they missed a field goal. Georgia played good special teams and blocked a punt. and that was a big reason they won. I do think, Brandon, there's a difference in the quarterfinal round, because if you're looking at the 6-10 game, right, that we're talking about here,
Yeah.
you're talking about, or excuse me, the 7-10 game. You're talking about Texas A&M or Alabama, Miami, or Notre Dame versus Ole Miss or Tulane. Much easier path as the 3, amazingly, than as the 2.
Yeah, so a lot of that will be obviously determined, and I even think you could even see some 10s over 7, 9s over 10. Like I even think you could see some potential upsets in some of this too, because of how bunched up a lot of this is. For instance, like Texas A&M at one point in time, we may have been talking about them as a 2 or 3 seed. Now we're talking about them more near the bottom of the at-large consideration. So it's all going to be pretty wild when it's all said and done. We're going to learn more about this coming up in just a minute. How about the case for Alabama? As I've said before, you just mentioned you want the SEC championship game to mean something. To me, a pretty good thing for it to mean Georgia ended Alabama's season. I don't know that will happen. I think it might. I guess if you force me to make a pick, I do. My prediction would be that Alabama is about to be excluded, and I do think that would be a source of pride for Georgia fans. Certainly, the Georgia team probably is just ready to move on, but Georgia fans, I do think, would like the idea of ending Alabama's season. I don't know that they will. My prediction is that that's the more likely outcome here. What do you think's about to happen with Alabama?
Yeah, you're right. It would get the committee off the hook between choosing between Notre Dame and Miami, but boy, the number 1 seed in the SEC that beat Georgia earlier this season in Sanford Stadium, you're going to penalize them for playing an extra game that Notre Dame and Miami didn't. And I don't want to be a hypocrite, Brandon. It wasn't that long ago that Georgia lost an SEC game and got excluded in 2023. And it happened in 2018 when Georgia was one of the best teams in the country. And they played an Alabama team that beat everybody by more than 20 within, a touchdown on account of an injury to a linebacker and Justin Fields not knowing how to run the fake punt they practiced 100 times. And that was there, by the way. So I don't want to be a hypocrite, and I don't want to set the SEC up in the future, because next year you're looking at 9-game season and then a 10th SEC game via the SEC champ. That's tough to me. I mean, there's no conference that matches the depth and the physicality. And I mean, both those teams were walking wounded last night. And it was a great tribute to the effort. And clearly the Dawgs played with an unbelievable edge. I mean, you had Kirk Herbstreit comparing them to the back-to-back title games. I think you and I would agree. I mean, we could hear those pads popping. You can usually hear the contact, but last night, I don't know about you, but I was like, man, there were some train wrecks going on out there. Kirby had those guys motivated. So, and poor Alabama, they're missing 2 running backs. They're missing their tight end. I mean, all that Georgia pressure, overwhelming backups. LT Overton's guys, the punt block guy that Georgia exploits. It made it, Georgia was playing without Noah Thomas. You're not just down Colby Young, you're down your other perimeter threat, Noah Thomas, right? You're missing your best lineman, Drew Bobo. So both of these teams were walking wounded. And next year we're talking about there being another game after this one. So I don't want to say that an SEC champion or SEC championship game participant shouldn't be in or should be penalized for playing in that game. And DeBoer made a good argument. It's really a 2-touchdown game. He's not going for it on his own 11 or 12-yard line if he's playing for style points. I mean, 21-7, when you consider the short fields, I mean, it was going to be that kind of game that Georgia, I thought, played its best game of the year. They won it in every phase of the game. Alabama has been playing poor of late, but I just don't think you can penalize the number 1 seed in the SEC by knocking them out when those other 2 teams didn't even play a game. So
let me just play devil's advocate for a moment, because I think this is a fun debate. As far as like the number 1 seed goes, and that's what obviously Alabama's going to argue for. I think the SEC has even, done some social media stuff related to Alabama being the number 1 seed. That is a semantic description and nothing but that, given the fact that the SEC had another 11-1 team. Alabama didn't play it. Alabama's only the number 1 seed because of a tiebreaker scenario that people really can't understand. I mean, it's not as if this was decided on the field that Alabama were to come into this as the number 1 seed. Yes, they did previously beat Georgia head-to-head, and that's frankly their best argument. The team that beat it, they already won on the road. The argument for Alabama is more they already beat Georgia, and not so much we're the number 1 overall seed. By the way, we may be getting ready to start seeing some of these rankings. But all of this, for me, Mike, ultimately falls on deaf ears because of what you just said. In 2023, Georgia came in as the number 1 ranked team in the country, and we had never seen a team ranked number 1 fall out of the top 4. And Georgia plummeted after a 29-game winning streak on the basis of a 3-point loss to Alabama. So on this show, and for my audience, to the extent that I can speak for them, there will be no tears shed for Alabama. And there is no human on the planet that's more pro-SEC than I am. I am a pro-SEC guy. That is the blood that I bleed. But if Alabama is excluded here in a couple of minutes, there will be no tears shed on the part of the folks in our audience. I'm fairly certain I can say that on their behalf.
Yeah, it was quite a payback for Georgia, by the way. So Alabama comes in and snaps Georgia's 33-game home win streak. Georgia says, "Oh yeah, well I'll raise you a 4-game, your 9-game SEC championship game win streak, your 17-game win streak in Atlanta, your 4-game win streak over Georgia in the SEC. Yeah, that's all gone." So Georgia and Alabama really kind of spoiled each other. That's the SEC, right? And as for the tiebreaker, this is one. BA, you saw A&M's schedule, okay? Texas was really, you look at who they played the bottom of the SEC essentially, and you got to give Alabama credit. I mean, I'm looking at the schedule now. I mean, they beat Georgia. They beat a ranked Vanderbilt team by 2 touchdowns. They go on the road and beat Missouri, which Missouri I think was either 1 loss or undefeated at that point. They handled Tennessee by 17 at home. That's a team Georgia's squeaked by.
Yeah, but if you're going to play hold on, I'm going to stop you right there. If you're going to play, and there's more to talk about than Alabama, but I do want to stop you on this. You can't do this was a 2, and I'm not saying you're doing this. I'm saying Kalen DeBoer is doing this. This was a 2-touchdown game, blah, blah, blah. That game against Tennessee, if you watched it, would have been a lot closer if not for a Tennessee scoring drive when they were knocking on the door of scoring, turned into a pick 6 and taken back the other way. In other words, you can argue both sides the same way,
Sure.
that both leads got extended because of extenuating circumstances, or you have to acknowledge that if you want to say the Georgia-Bama game last night was theoretically close in the final margin, then Kalen DeBoer is stuck saying the same thing about his team's win against Tennessee.
Yeah, and we had to hear it after Georgia's, controversial goal line stop against Auburn. Oh, if Auburn would have scored, it'd have been 17-0. Well, they didn't. Georgia made a play, right? And yeah, Tennessee did, and Alabama made a play. But again, the LSU, their loss to Oklahoma, they outgained. That was as close to a quote unquote good loss as you're going to get. Oklahoma's a pretty good football team. Beat Michigan, by the way. And that was a nice out of conference win. And then when I look at the 2 versus 3, and I can't wait to see it. To me, if it's got to be Georgia. You got one transitive property here. Georgia beat Texas 35-10. Ohio State won 14-7 and got outgained by almost 200 yards. So I just feel like Georgia should get that 2 seed. I think it would be a heck of a drama. Whoever they play, they haven't played A&M in 6 years. Yeah. So that's somewhat attractive. But if it's Notre Dame, it's the team that beat you last year. If it's Alabama, Georgia version 3. This has never happened, 3 games in one season. And if it's Miami, it's Georgia Carson back. Can you imagine the theater with you're getting a headache just thinking about the Georgia Carson back? I know I am too. It's like, oh my gosh.
I certainly am. So let me ask you this real quick, and we'll let you go because I know you want to watch these rankings come out. So to sum all this up, I'm going to ask you 2 questions. Give me your prediction, 3 teams for 2 spots between out, and we assume that BYU is going to drop because it was outside the at-large field last week. Give me the 2 teams first of all between Miami, Notre Dame, and Alabama. Which 2 of those 3 make this field?
I think Alabama stays at 9. I think Miami gets the head-to-head and gets the 10.
We'll watch that happen. Now, just for fun, it doesn't matter a ton to Georgia, but just for fun. Do you think the ACC champion is going to be excluded from the field by rankings? It seems like they should be, but this committee is also going to figure out a way to do whatever it wants to do. Do you believe that Duke gets in over James Madison, sneaking in as the number 12 seed here?
Only if Miami gets left out. I think you're going to have an ACC team in there some way, same shape, some form.
All right, so we'll watch it play out. Mike, good stuff. I appreciate it, and we'll look forward to reading plenty from you at DawgNation.com here.
Hey, BA, did you notice I didn't come over and tell you when I thought Georgia had this one won? I did not jinx it this time. You were staying far from me. We weren't going to jinx it this time. I appreciate
that, Mike. Yeah, good stuff. We'll look forward to talking to you, all right?
All right. Thanks, man. Have a good
All right,
one.
all right, playoff rankings getting ready to come out here. We are, by the way, going to be with you all throughout the postseason, giving you some great stuff. Want to thank a lot of the folks who make it possible, including our friends Jittery Joe's. Let me tell you something. I woke up this morning all bleary-eyed after last night working and covering and then celebrating this Georgia win against Alabama. And when you wake up bright and early in the morning, you want to feel refreshed. A great tasting cup of coffee from our friends at Jittery Joe's is a great way to do that. They've also got a tremendous franchise company for you right now, too. So if you want the great taste of Attack Today coffee in K-Cups, you can find that. If you want to get a great turnkey business that gives you a chance to make the money you've dreamed of and have the freedom you've always aspired towards, well, you've got a great chance to do that with Jittery Joe's. Also, download the Jittery Joe's app, and your first beverage is going to be half off. I have sound down, but video up, and we now officially know our first team. No surprise here. After winning the Big Ten championship game last night, Indiana is now the number 1 overall seed. And frankly, you got to give credit to Indiana here. We obviously a year ago very skeptical of the Hoosiers for good reason, and I'll tell you as well. We're human beings here. We're guided oftentimes by emotion. Kirk Cignetti, the Indiana coach, pretty unlikable as far as I'm concerned. And so last year, maybe it was easy to disregard them, and frankly, perhaps it was too easy to disregard them. But not able to disregard them anymore. Big wins for them this season, 13-0 Big Ten champions, beating Ohio State last night, even though the point spread was fairly thin margin. The truth is, and how about this, big news, Ohio State holds on to the 2 seed. So I don't know this makes a huge degree of difference for Georgia, but it is interesting that Ohio State last night loses close to Indiana, stays at the 2 seed. And this, if you're looking for a foreshadowing for how Alabama could be treated, this is Ohio State not being punished for championship Saturday. They did not fall farther than the team that it lost to. They're not going to drop below Georgia. So Georgia would have maybe had a chance on the heels of a dominant win against Alabama to move up to number 2. That will not happen. Ohio State gets the 2 seed. Once again, respect for the loser of a conference championship game there. That could foreshadow how Alabama is treated. So that's our first piece of news. Now, as I said before, when you see this field come out completely, you are going, I think, to realize what I'm telling you right now is if both teams continue to advance, Georgia will play Ohio State in the semifinals. So I don't think a huge degree of difference between who makes the 2 and who makes the 3. And Georgia, there you have it. This is your headline, and we knew this, but Georgia now officially clinches a top 4 seed. Georgia ranked number 3 coming into championship weekend, beats Alabama, a team that was theoretically in the field by 3 touchdowns, and stays where it is. Number 3, Georgia has, for the second straight year of the 12-team playoff era, earned a top 4 seed, a bye, as an SEC champion. So Georgia will get some much-needed rest. Georgia will get a chance to recuperate, and Georgia will get a chance to watch the drama unfold below it. The Lion does not concern itself with the opinions of teams desperate to make the playoff, and Georgia can just sit back and laugh as the rest of these folks beg their way in. Georgia now knows it will be number 3. And how about this for Texas Tech? Marshalling its NIL dollars with its famous booster Cody Campbell, pulling away to win convincingly against BYU in the lead into the SEC championship yesterday. The Texas Tech Red Raiders at 12-1 have become the class of the Big 12, and they will get a top 4 seed. They will be seeded 4th, and I believe, although I am not completely sure about this, I believe by being seeded 4th, that might keep them out of the Cotton Bowl. It might keep them out of the Cotton Bowl, which would obviously be where they would like to be. We'll see how that officially goes here in a moment. I'm going to need some confirmation on that. But there is a chance that Ohio State may go to the Cotton Bowl. Obviously, Indiana will be going to the Rose Bowl. We think that Georgia's going to the Sugar. So Texas Tech may get relegated a little farther from home, being the 4 seed. So that might matter. We'll get official confirmation on that in a moment. We do believe, though, as the 3 seed, Georgia is going to the Sugar Bowl. Oregon, 5th seed last week, remains at 5. This is going to be a pretty advantageous spot to be. And Oregon, you better believe, going to be watching closely to see who it is that gets that 12 spot later on, because that'll be the 5-12 first-round matchup. Oregon likely the biggest point spread favorite in round 1, whether it's Duke or whether it's James Madison. theoretically the Duke game would be slightly more challenging, even though Duke has a much worse record. So Oregon in a 5 spot will be a huge favorite at home. And that's a team that I think people changed their opinion on slightly once it got the win late in the season against USC. Really did not have a signature win prior to that. But getting the win against USC, I think, made folks feel a little better about Oregon, and certainly the committee showing it a lot of respect. Now, it should be Ole Miss perhaps coming in at number 6. We'll see, and that will be the case. Ole Miss not punished for Lane Kiffin not coaching. I don't know that was ever a serious consideration that it would be, but it was talked about. In fact, we brought it up right when the Kiffin news was coming out. Ole Miss at 11-1 will get a home game. It'll obviously be coached by Pete Golding. Charlie Weiss Jr. Is back, at least for the playoff, as Ole Miss offensive coordinator. And so this Ole Miss season, that's essentially the best in program history, 11-1, going to the college football playoff for the first time. They will get a chance to have a playoff game at home at Vaught Hemingway Stadium. They will face the number 11 seed. In all likelihood, this is going to be a Tulane team that Ole Miss has already blown out earlier this year. Texas A&M gets the 7 spot. That means the Aggies will host a home playoff game. And for Texas A&M, a team that has not been ranked number 1 in the country since the 1930s, they are also essentially enjoying the best season in their program, certainly the modern history, if not almost history all time. Texas A&M having its best season since joining the SEC, even better probably than the pandemic season, which they did have a top 10 ranking, and they will get a home playoff game at Kyle Field. And we're expecting Oklahoma to be the 8th seed, which means of the 4 first-round matchups, 3 of those will be at SEC home venues after a year ago when no first-round playoff game was in an SEC venue this year, and it is now official. Oklahoma gets the 8th seed. So to recap here for a moment, top 4 seeds look like this. Indiana, the number 1 overall seed, as they deserve. Georgia did not get the 2 seed. They stay at 3. Ohio State, after losing the Big Ten title game, they drop down to 2. Texas Tech, on the virtue of its win of the Big 12 title game, moves into the top 4. They get the 4th of those 4 top seeds this year. Those not reserved solely for conference champions, but for the 4 highest-ranked teams. It looks like Indiana, Ohio State, Georgia, Texas Tech. Then the 4 home games for the top 4 seeds next, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Oregon's at 5. Ole Miss is at 6. Texas A&M is at 7. Oklahoma is at 8. Obviously no change from last week's rankings on that, with all 3 of those teams sitting idle this weekend. And now perhaps we'll pause for some drama here, because there are 2 at-large spots remaining. It is Alabama, it is Notre Dame, it is Miami. Let me give you the steel man argument for all 3 of these teams. Alabama's going to say, as Mike Griffith pointed out, it was the number 1 seed in the SEC, the toughest conference in the world, coming into last night. It lost a game to a team that it beat on the road, and Alabama is in. Alabama is in as the 9 seed. So how about that for Alabama, making this college football playoff as a 9 seed and going on the road in round 1? How about for the second time this year, it'll now play Oklahoma, a team that beat it in Tuscaloosa earlier this season and also beat it convincingly last year. But Alabama has made the college football playoff field. It will be on the other side from Georgia, on the other side of the bracket. But Bama, after rushing for -3 yards last night and getting throttled by Georgia, shut out through 3 quarters with 3 losses. For the first time ever, a 3-loss team has made the college football playoff. Alabama is in the college football playoff field. That means either Miami or Notre Dame is going to make it. Notre Dame has the higher power rating, and they've been the more highly ranked team by the committee all year. Miami, same record. They've been winning convincingly down the stretch. And obviously in week 1, the Hurricanes beat Notre Dame head-to-head. This is incredible drama. I don't know that there's an easy answer. And to borrow a phrase once made famous by a different show, I think it's also fun just to embrace the debate, that it's fun to have a playoff that's crowded. It's fun to have what feels like a good team being left out, I think. Arguing is what college football is all about. And so no doubt there's going to be a huge argument here, either on the basis of Miami or Notre Dame, and finally, head-to-head has prevailed. So as many suggested might happen, and you could have gotten a plus money bet on this as recently as yesterday, Miami has made the college football playoff. That means Notre Dame, that played for a national championship a year ago and beat Georgia in the Sugar Bowl, Notre Dame has been excluded from the playoff field. That's the story. Alabama makes it with 3 losses. Miami makes it on the heels of a head-to-head win against Notre Dame, and the Fighting Irish has been excluded from the playoff. We'll slot Tulane in all likelihood in as the number 11 seed in a moment. The TV broadcast going to stop and pause to have this discussion. And I am curious because, I mean, obviously Georgia could play one of these two teams. So that matters. But other than Carson Beck's presence on the Miami roster, I don't know that Georgia fans have had a real strong take and a real strong opinion on the Miami-Notre Dame comparison, but this will be the big debate, excluding Alabama from this for a moment. Did Miami deserve to be in over Notre Dame because of its head-to-head win? And to the extent this matters, if it did, then how come it wasn't before this? Obviously what they're going to say, and this was already predicted with BYU dropping down, now Miami and Notre Dame were side by side in the rankings. I think they probably got it right on Miami. I believe I probably would have put Notre Dame in over Alabama, but I think the committee probably got it right with Miami. I don't want this to be decided by numbers alone. I don't want power ratings and computer formulas. I want a human element to read the data and then interpret the data the best that it possibly can, the best they possibly can. And so I think the humans do need to step in and say, yeah, you know what, head-to-head probably matters. So if it is, in a vacuum, a choice between Miami and Notre Dame, I do believe the committee probably got that right. I think it is going to be wildly controversial. And if anything, it's going to be the Alabama presence that's the most controversial of all, that Alabama does make the college football playoff field with 3 losses. That's going to be a big deal. And that is the overall story there. 5 total SEC teams will make it after 3 made it a year ago. So what's still left to be determined is obviously what's going to happen at number 12, and this is mostly just for fun, just for college football diehards, who makes it at number 12 between James Madison and Duke. Mike foreshadowed earlier that Miami got in, therefore they might feel a little bit more freedom to exclude Duke at the bottom. Could be that is the case. Obviously, Tulane, which ran through North Texas in the American Athletic Conference Championship, it gets itself the 11 seed, playing a team that it's already lost convincingly to this year. There is a lot of scrutiny right now of why there even is a Group of 5 team in the college football playoff, just given how undeserving that level has been this year of a true playoff-worthy team. It's not always the case. It is the case in most years, and it's never probably been more true than it is this year. So the only playoff team still yet to be announced is what's going to happen at number 12. And if you go by the rankings last week, then that should be James Madison. And it is. The Dukes at 12-1, the Sun Belt Conference champions from Harrisonburg, Virginia, have made the college football playoff. Now, their coach is also leaving too. So you've got Tulane's coach, James Madison's coach, Ole Miss coach, all leaving for new jobs. So a full quarter, 25% of the college football playoff field is set to lose its coach, or in the case of Ole Miss, already lost its coach. But nonetheless, the Dukes get in, and the ACC champion is excluded, but an ACC team does get in. So let's recap it this way. When we saw Ohio State move up to number 2, or should say drop down to number 2, but not any further than that, that was a harbinger that Conference Championship Saturday was going to be respected, and it was. Ohio State didn't fall below Georgia. Ohio State stayed in that top 2. That foreshadowed Alabama remaining in the field at 9, which is really right where it was ranked a week ago. So Alabama, after losing 28-7, didn't drop down at all, interestingly enough. Miami comes in at number 10. Notre Dame is excluded. So Notre Dame, after being ranked higher than Miami the entire time, ultimately does not finish that way. Pretty remarkable, all things considered. And then the bottom of the bracket looks like this: James Madison at 12. They'll take on Oregon, the 5 seed, and Tulane gets it as the number 11 seed. They will take on Ole Miss at number 6. So Georgia, as the 3 seed, will be watching that that 7-10 game to find out who it'll be playing. So they'll be watching that to see what goes down there. So that should be interesting to see. That's Texas A&M against Miami. So the 7-10 game will eventually be what Georgia plays the winner of. So it'll either be Georgia taking on as Mike Griffith pointed out earlier, a rare SEC opponent, Texas A&M. It's only played them since A&M joined the league in 2019. A&M has been in the league since 2012, only played Georgia just once. That was in 2019. Could play Texas A&M. It'll host Miami, or, and these storylines write themselves, a matchup against Georgia's former quarterback, Carson Beck. So 7-10, A&M, Miami, the winner of that game will face Georgia in what we certainly believe and can essentially say is going to be the Sugar Bowl. So that is the story. Indiana, Ohio State, Georgia, Texas Tech, Oregon, Ole Miss, Texas A&M, Oklahoma, Alabama, Miami, Tulane, James Madison, 1 through 12. That is your college football playoff field. We're going to hear from Kaylee Manzel coming up. Connor Riley going to join us there too. May have Jeff Sintel before it's all said and done reacting to this. Let me also just read a couple of comments from the chat here real quick to find out what people think about this. B.A.'s Cardigan says he really likes our bracket. I obviously, we're going to, shoot from the hip here and give opinions.
Yep. You hear me all right?
I just don't know necessarily that I like any bracket over another. I would say the one team I would want to avoid playing as long as I possibly could, not because I'm scared of them or anything like that. I just think the toughest matchup is Ohio State. So Georgia would face it in a semifinal game. That's farther away than a national or I should say a little closer than a national championship game would be. So that's slightly challenging. I do think that Miami, Texas A&M, neither of those are going to be pushovers for Georgia in a quarterfinal situation. But I probably would feel that way about anybody. I am glad that Alabama is on the other side of the bracket. I don't think anybody needs to see Georgia and Alabama play for a third time unless it is for a national championship. So moving them to the other side of the bracket, I think that makes a ton of sense. Do I have this wrong? Okay, so the bracket is correct and I am wrong. Why would number 1 not play 8 and 9? Let me bring in Connor Riley on this and let's get me on the right page here. Let's see the bracket here one more time because apparently trying to do this on the fly in the quickly. Can we put this back on the screen again so I can see this? And we'll bring in Connor Riley to talk about this. So let me make sure I correct myself on this. So Georgia will play the winner of Ole Miss Tulane, and Ohio State will play the winner of Texas A&M Miami. So I jumped the gun on that, trying to do this in my head. So the bracket that you see on your screen, this is correct. Georgia will wait Ole Miss Tulane, so potential rematch with Ole Miss. And obviously, you got to imagine the Ole Miss fans will be looking to travel if they do play in that spot. And on the Georgia side of the bracket, it's Miami A&M, the winner of that, moving on to face Ohio State. So that's the situation. And now let's bring in Connor Riley on this. Connor, the field is announced. Let me start with what this means for Georgia. What do you think about the draw that Georgia has on its side of this bracket as the number 3 seed?
I don't think things could have worked out better for Georgia with their bracket and with their path. Now, I don't agree with the committee's decision to put Ohio State at 2 and not reward Georgia for winning its conference. But when you look at those games and those matchups, and you're looking at the possibility of facing either Ole Miss, a team that will not have Lane Kiffin in that game, or a Tulane team where John Summerall is also thinking about his next job at Florida, as opposed to either Texas A&M or Miami, 2 teams that are frankly more talented than what Ole Miss and Tulane have. I think that's a huge win for Georgia. Now, ultimately, yes, you're going to have to play Ohio State, and you're going to have to play good teams to win along the way. But as far as the early setup and the way we look at this right now with Georgia's potential quarterfinal game, I don't think that there will be a bigger favorite in round one than Georgia versus whoever they end up playing.
Yeah, the quarterfinal round, you're right. And the reason why I was getting that confused on the 7-10 is because I was actually in my mind, even though I knew they weren't, I was thinking about Georgia's the 2 seed there. But I kind of agree with something that Mike Griffith said a little earlier, that while, yeah, I think that deservingly maybe Georgia should have been the 2 seed, I think you're right. I mean, to me, Texas A&M and Miami, I believe, are both more formidable than the likely winner Ole Miss would be. If you give me the choice, and listen, the Ole Miss-Georgia game was a dogfight, so this may be words you live to regret, but if you give me the choice of facing Ole Miss or A&M Miami, I would rather play Ole Miss. You got to play somebody. I think I probably would rather play Ole Miss right now than A&M or Miami, I believe.
I'd rather play Ole Miss than, say, Notre Dame as well. I would include them in that discussion. I think that Georgia, again, look, maybe you can spin this into this is the value of winning the SEC and creating your own path and getting the way that it works out. You know, I think that Georgia team, look, it's playing great football. Defensively, they are a completely different team than what we saw in that first game against Ole Miss. And when you factor in that Ole Miss, again, Lane Kiffin was so important to what they did. You've heard Kirby Smart talk about the way that he calls and dictates and manages a game. Pete Golding, that's going to be the second time he's ever done that. And this is not to disparage Golding in any way. I think a lot of coaches would struggle in this, not dissimilar to how Gunnar Stockton struggled in his first career start in the Sugar Bowl a year ago. You're just not going to be as good as the guy that was there before you that has all that experience. And so the fact that they are getting that, the Ole Miss team that is going to be weakened than it used to be, I think that is a massive, massive win for Georgia. And again, they got to take care of business. As you point out, I think it's fair to say those could be words that Georgia goes on to regret. It's going to be a motivated Ole Miss team to go out there and prove that Lane Kiffin left a great team. But if you're Georgia, you're playing your best football of the season, giving up 2 touchdowns in your last 4 games, the last team to really score and move the ball at you and give you, for the first 3 quarters anyway, your worst defensive performance of the season, to potentially have them waiting for you, or a Tulane team that, when it's gone up against P5 competition this year, has just not been at the same level. I think that is a great step in the direction for what Georgia could be. Remember, last year, Georgia was an underdog in that Sugar Bowl against Notre Dame when the final point spread came out. That's not going to be the case this year for Georgia, regardless of who they play, Ole Miss or Tulane.
No, I think that's right. Now, I'll also say this, too. I mean, a year ago, we sat here in this spot, and, boy, I was just loving the draw for Georgia, and obviously a team that I assumed that Georgia would beat, Notre Dame, before the game was played. I assumed that Georgia would win that game. Ultimately it didn't. I do find myself a little gun shy to say, oh, man, this is going to be a game. Look, we live in a world in which college football is just more bunched up than it used to be. And so I would be on guard for anything other than the 2, group of 6 teams. Any of these at-large teams, I'd be a little on guard for different reasons. But really about playing all of them. The only 2 strong opinions I have is, as I think you want to avoid Ohio State as long as you possibly can, even though that Indiana beat them last night, I still think that Ohio State's the most dangerous team to play. And frankly, my number 2 opinion is I don't want to see Alabama again until a national championship, and they're on the other side of the bracket. So that's really it for me. It's not even I think that Alabama is like the second best team or anything like that. Those are just the 2 strong opinions I have. Let me avoid Ohio State as long as I can. Let me avoid Alabama as long as I can. And really the rest of these teams, you might as well just mix them up and draw them out of a hat. I think they all present their own challenges. And with college football being the way that it is right now, I think you've kind of got to be on guard for anything. Oklahoma and its defense, Oregon and its playmakers, Texas Tech and its defense. Every one of these teams has at least something about it that would, cause it to be recommended. I don't see a 2022 TCU in this field, in other words.
No, and if I could push back even on the Ohio State point for a little bit, and there are 2 games against top 15 teams this year, because I'm not counting Michigan as that, and they didn't finish as such, and I think they were a very fugazi team this year. Ohio State scored 14 points and 10 points in stadiums they have a lot of experience in. I think it is fair, despite the talent they have with Bo Jackson, Jeremiah Smith, Carnell Tate, I think it's a little fair to question what this Ohio State offense net might be. Now, that defense is great. I'm not taking anything away from them. That game could be a first to 10 points if Georgia and Ohio State were to meet. But I think your point is an excellent one, where we've seen this year that college football has just thinned out. And you're seeing it in recruiting rankings this year. I believe the difference between number 1 and number 30 in the recruiting rankings was about 80 points. That's thinner than it has ever been at any point in the modern recruiting era. So to your point, again, we weren't sitting here a year ago talking about Notre Dame as a team that could go on a run to the national championship game. But that's exactly what they ended up doing. In Ohio State, we were wondering what were they going to look like when they got into the college football playoff field a year ago coming off that loss to Michigan. And they went out there and they ran through Tennessee and they ran through Oregon and then they took care of business against Texas and Notre Dame. So it's one thing to get to this point. The first part of the season for college football is now over, and now we are moving into a second season where some teams going to have to win 4 games. Some are going to have to win 3. Georgia falls into that bucket of 3, and they've got to put together 3 really good games in a row to win a national championship, which is the goal.
All right, just for fun, and we can make this kind of quick because I know you've got a lot to offer coverage-wise on all of this. Let's do the hot topics, starting at the top of the at-large controversies. What did you think about Alabama getting in?
I agree with it because if they took them out because of how they lost yesterday, I think you would have to take out SEC champ. You would have to get rid of conference games as a whole. And look, with Georgia not moving up yesterday, maybe we're taking a step towards that also. But again, there have to be some stakes in these games. And while I believe that Alabama should not be punished for playing a 13th game when Notre Dame and Miami did not, if I'm a Miami fan and I'm especially a Notre Dame fan, I'm very frustrated with how things like Alabama have been judged, where they get bumped up a week ago above Notre Dame despite beating a poor Auburn team. And then they get their doors blown off yesterday by Georgia, and it doesn't really impact them at all. And even they stay at 9, not falling. But then you look at a team like BYU, who gets its doors blown off by Texas Tech. They fall in their rankings, and that ends up giving Miami the leeway to jump Notre Dame because they're on the same seed line next to each other there. So I agree with the decision to keep Alabama in because of the larger ramifications. But if I am a Miami and especially a Notre Dame fan, I am upset with where Alabama is right now.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. And I guess my question would be is, if Virginia won last night, who's in the field between Notre Dame and Miami, you think?
I think Miami is still in, but I understand the logic of, well, we have to have at least one ACC team in the field, and getting Miami in there does placate that.
And listen, I'm going to give you a ton of credit on this, Connor, because you called this on the spot when we react to the top 25 right when it came out this past Tuesday, and you could have still gotten plus money, which is, a slight underdog pick on Miami to make the field as recently as yesterday. You could have still gotten plus money on Miami. But you said last week, I'm going to give you a ton of credit for this, that you thought Miami was the big winner because it ultimately played out exactly as you described that it might. With, 10, 11, and 12 last week of Notre Dame, BYU, Miami. BYU loses, it drops. Now Miami and Notre Dame are head-to-head, and now, or I should say side-by-side, and then the head-to-head for Miami came in. I'll give you a ton of credit. You saw that right in the moment. And I know for a fact, just as someone who's addicted to the internet, that is not what the larger, I think, portion of the college football world saw that as last week. But you really were on that pretty quick.
We're just trying to do things and keep it real here, and that's why we tune into these TV shows on Tuesday to try and sift through all the garbage that they spew out there. But again, if I'm a Notre Dame fan, I'm real upset today. And look, you had to take care of business. You blew that game against Texas A&M, and Miami was just a better team than you. And give Miami credit. Despite really fumbling their way through the middle of the season, they righted themselves, got to the end of the season with the exact same record as Notre Dame. And that head-to-head win carried the day today. And I think ultimately it was a day of the committee choosing to take the lesser of two evils, in that if you don't take Miami, you really wonder, okay, what's the point of playing these games? And then if you don't take Alabama, it's, well, what are the point of these conference championship games? I do think that today was a small win for games on the field mattering.
Yes.
But at the end of the day, I'm still very concerned with how this committee chooses to do things moving forward. One other note here.
Please.
The expectation is that Georgia will play in the Sugar Bowl, as they are the highest ranking SEC team in the field, and they are also ranked above the highest ranked Big 12 team. They will be playing Ole Miss or Tulane, where there are going to be a lot of fans in that game. It's going to be easy for them to get there. That is going to be a home game in New Orleans for Tulane. It has just been officially announced that is going to be the Sugar Bowl. So big thing to note there. And the game time for that, 8 Eastern on ESPN. The Ole Miss Tulane game is at 3:30 on December 20th on TNT.
Okay, so there you go. So first of all, that's exciting to think about. And we'll do this real quick. And I'm going to bring on Kaylee Manzel, and we'll do more of this with her. You talk about big time. To my knowledge, and maybe I'm wrong about this, we've seen Florida State in a Sugar Bowl. We've never seen SEC versus SEC in a Sugar Bowl, right? I can't imagine we have.
That sounds correct.
I'm doing this off the fly, and I've already gotten the bracket wrong in my head, so maybe I've gotten that wrong too. But if Oxford to New Orleans is not a million miles, so you could have a lot of Ole Miss fans for what would be one of the biggest games that program's ever played, or as Connor said, a true home game for Tulane, which used to play its home games at the Louisiana Superdome going back a number of years ago. But to me, Connor, I'm biased. It just feels big time. You win the SEC championship, you enjoy Christmas, then you play a traditional bowl game on a traditional bowl time slot. Oh my gosh, this just feels so big for Georgia. Obviously, last year there was a lot of disappointment with the loss to Notre Dame, but this just feels like a big time path for UGA. I really think it does.
It's exactly what you want, and this is why you go out there and you win the SEC championship. So you get all of this. You get the bye. You get the Sugar Bowl, the big-time bowl experience. You get the week to scout whoever you might end up playing. You don't have to sweat in the, 14 hours from the end of that game to Selection Sunday. This is why you win the SEC championship. This is why it still matters.
All right, very quick. You can make this, short to the point. How many teams do you think Notre Dame is better than that made this field as an at-large?
I think they're better than Ole Miss. I think they're better than Texas A&M and Miami, even though they lost to both of those teams. I think they're better than Oklahoma. I think they're better than what the Alabama team we've seen, and I think they're better than Tulane, and I think they're better than James Madison. So that puts it at 7. So the only teams I don't think they're better than would be the top 5. And
that's about where they're power rated too. That's about where they're power. Yeah, that's about where they're power rated. And to the Notre Dame fans, I tell you, guess what? Get in line. Because in 2023 and in 2018, there was a lot of that being said around here too. So not exactly the most, egregious miscarriage of justice, because a lot of folks down here in the South have felt that same feeling before. Connor, great stuff. Thanks for your time. Can't wait to read all of your thoughts on this at DawgNation.com. And obviously a really fun, month of coverage coming up, and what we hope lasts a whole lot longer than that. Dogs back in the college football playoff in the Sugar Bowl with a chance at a big-time playoff run. Good stuff, Connor. Thanks for being here.
Yep, as always, it's a pleasure.
So I'm being told in 1964, and by the way, great job by our research staff here, which is mostly just Jay Black, but 1964, Alabama played Ole Miss in a Sugar Bowl back then. So there you go. Interesting to think what has long been, and I think the younger college football fans probably don't think about this the same way we do, but for those of us who are about my age, the SEC and the Sugar Bowl have always had this deep tie. When I was a very young kid, the old saying was you can't spell sugar without UGA, because that's what Georgia did in 80, 81, 82, a little bit younger. I was a little bit too young to remember that, but that was like the old saying. So now to have the potential anyway of SEC versus SEC in that game would be something. Or, as Connor pointed out, Tulane playing in its hometown, and don't you know they'd come out big in support of that. That'll be interesting to see. Let me give a shout out to Cercheros. Obviously, you're getting ready to watch all these big games coming up. Great watch party food can be provided by Cercheros. You got a big catering event, 10 or more people, burritos, bowls, quesadillas, all of that. Cercheros has got you on that. They're also a big part of our DawgNation postseason coverage, our DawgNation postseason coverage here too. So enjoy it for your watch parties, tailgates, or you get ready for a Christmas party. They're great on that. Or if you just want a delicious lunch, a wonderful meal, you can go by one of the 40 locations they have in Georgia and across the Southeast. So check out Cercheros online at Cercheros.com. That's Surcheros, Cercheros.com for more on that. Great to have Cercheros as a part of our DawgNation postseason coverage. Also great to have Kaylee Manzel here too. Kaylee, as we're talking, you see the entire field come out. Georgia at 3, could have perhaps been number 2. Alabama stays in, even though Georgia throttled them last night. Miami finally, after being ranked behind Notre Dame the entire time, leaps ahead of the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. And to make sure I correct myself after getting this in error earlier, because I was thinking about Georgia the 2 seed. Frankly, it's amazing that I can do that in my head anyway. But the point is, Georgia looking at the winner of the Ole Miss-Tulane game, and then facing the survivor of the trio that includes Ohio State, Texas A&M, and Miami. All of this coming out a moment ago. Kaylee, what's your early thoughts just taking all this in?
I mean, if I'm thinking back in chronological order, and I know it wouldn't have mattered at the end of the day because they would have been on the same side of the bracket, but I think the fact that the committee put Ohio State above Georgia is honestly ridiculous. I mean, who is Ohio State's best win? Is it Texas, who Georgia absolutely dominated? Is it a Michigan team that's been subpar all season long? I know they played in a close conference championship game last night, but it's hard for me to sit here and accept the fact that the committee is still willing to put Ohio State above Georgia. We're looking at similar situations from 2023 when Georgia, who was ranked number one coming off of a national championship, lost their conference championship and dropped 5 spots. I mean, so I know it doesn't matter. They're on the same side, but that was just the first thing that stuck out to me. And ultimately, I think that when it comes to the side of the bracket that Georgia is on, if it's not Georgia, I do believe that the national championship will come, or the national champion will come from the bottom side of the bracket. I think there's just more talent down there. I think the strength of wins and the strength of record across the board is more advanced on the bottom side, but I actually think that the committee got it right this time, but it's such a shame that they have led Notre Dame on this entire season. If it ever came down to head in this decision that they had to make, I think they should have just kept Miami above Notre Dame since they started the rankings.
So as you're speaking, I'm also learning new information. Jay Black, our producer, shares this. I want to make sure I convey this correctly. So even though Georgia and Ohio State played in a very memorable Peach Bowl going back in the 2022 season, the Peach Bowl is slated to be a national semifinal game. But given the fact that Indiana is only about an 8-hour drive from Atlanta as the number one seed, Indiana would earn the right to play in Atlanta. And that means the theoretical semifinal matchup between Ohio State and Georgia would actually take place in the Fiesta Bowl. Ohio State, I believe, has been in the Fiesta Bowl. Georgia has not. So these two teams, not if they were to rematch their thriller from 2022, it would not be in the same venue, and it would not be essentially a home game for Georgia. It'd be some big time travel all the way out to Arizona, a place where Georgia has not been. So, Kaylee, interesting that the one seed Indiana would at least earn a little bit of a travel advantage there, getting to play in Atlanta as the one seed, and the bracket remains unchanged. Even if Indiana loses, by the way, you don't reseed. So Georgia and Ohio State would take on each other in Arizona and not the much closer venue here in Atlanta and Georgia.
Yeah, which is crazy because I think even last night maybe we got a little bit ahead of ourselves and just assumed that's the path that Georgia would take going to the Peach Bowl. But last night, after looking at the rules, the number one seed does have the right to choose. So it would make sense that the one seed Indiana would want to go to Atlanta. And I know that's a venue that Georgia is familiar playing in. But selfishly, I'm excited for the opportunity to potentially go to Arizona. It's a state I've never been to. Obviously, Georgia doesn't have much history in the Fiesta Bowl, but I mean, you got to get that win there or have the opportunity to play there to start the history books with Georgia and the Fiesta Bowl. So selfishly, I'm kind of excited for that, even though I know it's probably a little bit easier for Georgia fans to get to the Peach Bowl, and maybe you do lose some of that home field advantage, but selfishly, I'm a little bit excited for the potential of that happening.
Yeah, it certainly would be. And talk about an anticipated game, too. Two of the biggest programs. They obviously played a college football playoff thriller just a couple of seasons ago. And, gigantic fan bases that are always bumping into each other online. But the two teams themselves just have not played very much. The last game prior to the 2022 Peach Bowl would have been the 1992 Citrus Bowl. So you haven't seen Georgia and Ohio State on the field together very much. But man, oh man, when it comes to online arguments and Twitter squabbles and things like that, they are no strangers to each other. Kaylee, I guess we'll finish with this. To go back to last night for a moment, the one thing I've been saying for a while is, because we've all been debating, is it good to play in the SEC championship or rather be the 5 seed? Who do you want to play and whatever else? I've been saying this repeatedly. It's not who you play and it's not when you play them. For Georgia, it's how it plays. And Georgia needs to play like a national champion to think it can become a national champion. Well, to me, Kaylee, that's what they did last night. This Georgia defense was back in a way that is reminiscent of its best teams a couple of years ago, and clearly an amazingly improved unit from certainly where it was at the beginning of this season. And it was great to see. No more preferred team for that to happen against for the average Georgia fan than Alabama. What did you think about what we saw from these Dogs last night?
The confidence that that win instilled in this Georgia team is something that we're going to be talking about for a long time. I understand that Alabama is going to have Georgia's number for probably quite a long time, but maybe that helped them get over that mental block of the team that they're facing. And not only does it help this Georgia team get over their confidence when playing Alabama, but also the confidence to move forward through this playoff, knowing that you're playing your best football at the right time. I mean, we've watched this Georgia team develop in front of our own eyes, and I really don't think that the win over Alabama hit me until this morning. I just was so numb from the matchup between these two teams over the course of the last few years. I just hadn't accepted it yet. So this morning, knowing how it all went down, I mean, they dominated that game from start to finish. And I think even the guys on the telecast were saying that nobody wants to face this Georgia team right now. And I think that's very, very true. And if you would have told us that midseason, we would have thought that something crazy had to happen, and something crazy has happened. It's happened in front of our own eyes, and maybe it's been more of a slow burn, but my goodness, I think this team needed that confidence last night, especially some of these young guys that have had to come in and fill in for starters who have had injuries. Guys like Malachi Toiver, he needed that confidence boost. So just getting hot at the right time. We said that there was going to be a team to do that, and it just so happens to be the Dogs.
You know why nobody wants to play Georgia right now, Kaylee?
Because they're playing therapists. Oh my God, you have a belt. No, you don't.
There you go, right there. I figure if Christian Miller can do it and Jordan Hall can do it, I can bring the belt out.
Who says Brandon's not trendy? You're staying ahead of the times. You might be a little bit too chronically online, but I can respect that.
There you go. That's what they did last night right there.
I
love
mean,
it from
there's no
Christian
better
Miller.
way to explain it.
Do I look as cool when I do it as Christian Miller does when he does it, Kaylee?
Absolutely.
Let's watch and see. Am I as cool?
Absolutely, you do.
Got to make sure I get mine in the microphone so you can hear that pop. That's what it was last night.
But we see it. We'll get some practice in.
Was it not showing up on camera the way that it should? See,
it looks good, but it maybe doesn't sound as crisp.
Does it not sound? See, I got to work on that. You know what we need? I'm gonna have to get Jay to bring in like what do you call like one of those? It's a parabola mic when you have like the natural sound, the big concave looking thing. If we're gonna get the good pop with the leather. Going to make sure we do that. Kaylee, I hope you enjoy what's left of this weekend. Obviously, all smiles here with Georgia, the SEC champion. I know you and I are going to talk a lot via video in the days to come as we think about, what is it, the 13th time for Georgia in the Sugar Bowl. New Orleans, boy, it's a fun place to be, especially when your team gets a big win. And that is what Georgia is going to set out to do, erasing some bad memories from a year ago. Kaylee, thank you so much, and we'll talk to you throughout the week.
Well, shout out to the Dogs for giving you a few extra weeks to practice your belt motions.
That's right. We got to get a better mic in here. See, like this mic is made just to pick up a voice. It doesn't want to pick up a lot of room noise, but I need a mic that's going to pick up some room noise here in this. Kaylee, great stuff. Thank you so much. I'm going to bring in Jeff Sintel here in a moment, but you also heard Kaylee talking about Malachi Toiver stepping up last night and really manning that center position, something that, I mean, I talked to a lot of former players. There are a bunch of, well-known guys on the sideline before the game, and pretty much everybody was like, oh, man, Drew Bobo not playing, that's a really big deal. Everybody felt that way, but Malachi Toiver really stepped up. Obviously, that preparation for him was huge in that, and after the game, Kirby Smart talked about what it's like having to play in a situation like that when the guy that was in your spot prior to the injury had been holding it down so well. A lot of responsibility for Malachi, seemed to handle it well. And this is what Kirby said.
The biggest thing is get the snap there, right? That's 50% of the battle. Just get the snap there and get it accurate. And that was my concern. I knew he would play well, play hard, play physical. He did that. But I think the way we practice and what he went through last year prepared him for this year. He was prepared for this game because of everything he's been through. That kid, he had an injury, an ankle injury. Then he had he was out for another like 2-3 weeks with an injury. So, I mean, the kid's been through it. And he stepped up tonight, played well in Drew's absence, and I'm proud for him.
So strong stuff there from Kirby Smart. We were all proud for him, too. The guy who had a great view for this last night on the Georgia sideline. It always brings an interesting perspective because he just sees the game from a different place than I do. That's Jeff Sintel. Jeff, we're learning a lot today. George in the Sugar Bowl for a 13th time. You and I are a little too young for this, although you are much older than I am. You and I are a little too young for this, but there are a lot of Georgia fans that have some rough memories of like Penn State in the 82 season, a couple of games against a really good era for the Pitt program. We don't have any living memory of that for the most part. We only know the Sugar Bowl from, these last few trips that Georgia was able to take. A lot of us have memories, though, from last year. Georgia wants to, at least on the field, erase some of that after having lost to Notre Dame. What do you think about this path for Georgia, awaiting the winner of Ole Miss Tulane, and then between the trio of Ohio State that's waiting on Miami and Texas A&M, what would be, I guess we're saying, a Fiesta Bowl matchup after that? What do you make of this half of the bracket and the draw right now for Georgia?
Brandon, I guess I've got two different ways of looking at it. First of all, the enthusiastic, youthful zeal I have. In spirit, I'm much, much younger than you, Brandon. You're much of a
You look younger than I do. I don't dispute that.
You're much of a curmudgeon right now about some of these things. And Brandon, I'm a little salty about how this is all just dramatics and theater. It dawns on me two things, and there's two camps here. I like to be a balanced reporter here. Number one, Brandon, I think it's absolutely crap that really the SEC championship didn't matter at all, because Georgia was number 3 going in, Alabama was number 9 going in. They remain that way. Like, what's the point of playing that game except perhaps injuring your starting quarterback? There's part of me that wants to really shake that, I guess, diatribe.
But can I pause? Can I pause on that before you? I don't want you to lose your train of thought because I want to hear everything you want to say. But I want to pause on that particular point. So let's say the committee said, "Boy, Jeff Sintel just dragged us on DawgNation. We better listen to Jeff. All right, Georgia, you get to be the 2 seed." Like, do you really want to be the 2 seed? Do you want to play the winner of Miami, Texas A&M? I mean that like legitimately. Do you? All right, now you're the 2 seed. Okay, now you get to wear a different color jersey if you play Ohio State. But to get there, you got to go through the winner of Texas A&M, Miami. I don't think that's better than what the 3 seed has right now.
Yeah. So what I would say, I was like, on one hand, I got this thing where I'm trying to be objective, and I wanted to shake the fist about, what does the SEC championship game matter anymore? Because no positions in these rankings changed up at all. Fair point. Hot take point. But then when you look at it from maybe the realistic view, there's no difference in the bracket between the 2 and the 3. It means Georgia will face Ohio State in the semis. It will get an SEC team, regardless of which one it was. I believe A&M will beat Miami, but that's debatable considering how up and down Miami has played. I think when Miami is good, they're very good, especially on the lines of scrimmage. But I do think A&M has played in a much better league, and they've found a way not to lose to the Louisvilles and the SMUs of the world. So that's something to take under consideration. The fact that you get Ole Miss and Tulane again, Brandon, I mean, it's a farce. The same thing as JMU. I mean, we do remember that Ole Miss beat Tulane by 35 points earlier this year. No matter which way you want to slice it, Lane Kiffin gone, John Summerall on his way to Florida, whatever. I mean, these are basically kind of like exhibition bouts for these two teams. I mean, Brandon, it's supposed to be programming, right? Let's be real.
Yeah.
Who is going to watch JMU versus Oregon? I mean, really? Dan Lanning could play his entire second team and beat JMU handily. That's how out of control that is. And I thought I would be like the, overzealous guy coming in. And I would say, listen, to me, the other part of that point I was making, Brandon, you've never been to Arizona, I bet. You've never been to Scottsdale, that Fiesta Bowl area. That, should the Dogs bring that belt to ASS in the Sugar Bowl against very likely Ole Miss, that will be a great trip, Brandon. That's probably one of the best, coolest trips you can make. Camelback, that area. For Dog fans that may be sitting there going, New Orleans, we just did that. We just came there. We just saw that. That'll be fun. I think Arizona will be a new way to go, because that's a really cool place to hang out and go watch some football.
Yeah, the same way like Nashville's like bachelorette party paradise here on the eastern part of the country. Scottsdale is really that out there. So there's a lot of that going on. Also, Jeff, you may know this. My number one goal in life is to be tan in the winter. Like, that's the one thing I'm seeking more than anything else, more so than like my 401k or anything like that. I judge how well my life is going, how tan I am in the winter. So Arizona gives you a chance to be tan in the winter. I'm all about that. So all that sounds very good to me. I will certainly say that.
I mean, Brandon, you love this stuff probably because you're like inner Griswold is always on point this time of year. Wouldn't you love to go see the Grand Canyon? Have you ever done that?
I've flown over the Grand Canyon. I've not been to Grand Canyon National Park, but I have flown over it and seen it that way. But yeah, I think that's great. And listen, just seeing Georgia advance to the college ball playoff would be great. A year ago, I had the privilege of going to the national championship game and was very thankful to be there with my friends from Dr. Pepper. But I tell you, it was very hard to sit in our state and watch two, non-SEC, non-Southern teams playing for national championship, knowing that I've gotten to the point where I feel like Georgia's supposed to be there. Very hard to watch other folks enjoying what I think a lot of us have come to think of as Georgia's birthright, these deep playoff runs. So it was not fun being a spectator for most of this a year ago. Far better to think that this year you have a chance to make another deep run. And listen, I have no idea where it ends for Georgia. The way they played last night makes you think anything is possible. But this is a situation where the field itself is really crowded. We'll let you go here and we'll let everybody get back on their Sunday because it's NFL time now. People are getting ready to watch these games. Look, there are 12 teams in the playoff, obviously excluding Georgia. That's what we're talking about. Of the other 11, there are two you'd love to play. That's James Madison and Tulane. There are, for me, two that I'd like to avoid as long as possible, and that is Ohio State and Alabama, which is probably different than what some people think, but those are the two teams that I would want to delay playing as long as I could for various reasons. Of the other 7, Jeff, your guess is as good as mine. I wouldn't have thought that Notre Dame would have beaten Georgia a year ago, but it did. Indiana, who knows what you get when they match up against an SEC team. They have certainly proven themselves now over, consecutive years. So of the other 7 teams, your guess is as good as mine. We live in a world in college football now where seemingly almost anything can happen.
Here's what I think, Brandon, and this is probably going to be a little bit too hopeful, but you might like it. Georgia has entered the playoffs with a healthy quarterback, obviously. They got a dual threat quarterback as well. They got a guy that's the firebrand of his football team. That's all great. But I think also if you look up and down this bracket, and you do see the Big Ten doesn't have a really amazing spectacle or representation in there with the teams that they have. I think Oregon's a team that you see that I don't think Oregon's played a lot of great football teams whatsoever, although Oregon is a quality win for Indiana. Brandon, you and I were watching Ohio State and Indiana last night, just kind of sizing them up. I would say most would find that football game to be rather unimpressive. But, Georgia, the main thing, Brandon, and it was something that Kirby Smart stamped about this team. He said he loved this team. He loved the makeup of this team. Also, the thing he says is we're going to run the ball and we're going to stop the run better than anybody better than they did a year before. But what they've done now, Brandon, is they're doing it better than anyone in the country. And the thing to remember here is Georgia's playing really well. I think they're the team really nobody really wants to jump in front of. If Buckeye Nation or Hoosier Nation and all 7 people that would be watching that parallel respective program right there, they'd be sitting there probably should be saying they don't want any of Georgia right now, Brandon, because not only is Georgia playing well, they've got the dual threat element that makes defenses play Georgia a little bit different. Georgia's going to get a little bit healthier. Back spasms for Noah Thomas. Other guys are going to get a little bit healthier as well. But also they've got the most talented roster, one of the most talented rosters left in this bracket. And that's going to make Georgia a very, very formidable out in the weeks to come.
Jeff, great stuff. I tell you, man, it's going to be a lot of fun thinking about how all this plays out. Clearly a historic chapter of Georgia in its program continuing to be written, and 2025 a fun addition to that. So can't wait to read from you at DawgNation.com about all this. Obviously on our various shows, we'll be talking more about this, including DawgNation Daily this week. You'll have Before the Hedges presented by Kroger coming up too. I'm sure recruits will have plenty to say about another big run for Georgia, and fun to also look back on recruits from, like, say, this time a year ago who've already paid such big dividends for Georgia. So thanks for talking to us about all of that, and we're certainly looking forward to a really fun next month, and hopefully even more than that. Jeff, really appreciate your time.
Brandon, here's some breaking news. I know you'll love this. The media hotel this year in New Orleans is the Sheraton New Orleans. So there you go.
There you go. Looking forward to that.
Right in the middle of it all.
Exciting stuff. I'm telling you, man, fun to have Georgia. To me, it just feels big time. It's a big time game. It's a proper time slot. This is just what prestige feels like. You win the SEC championship, you enjoy Christmas, and you go for a New Year's right there in New Orleans. There is no better path to go through than that, because it just, to me, feels like big time college football. Jeff, great stuff. Thank you so much.
See you, man.
All right, so we'll get ready to wrap up here, recapping all of this.
One thing real quick. Hunter Yurchek has spoken.
Okay.
He said that the reason why Miami got in is because, on this almost direct quote, because BYU played so bad against Texas Tech, they had to move them down, and then when they were sitting next to each other, Miami had to go up.
which is exactly what Connor Riley described. I mean, I'm telling you right now, Connor was prescient, I think that's the right word, in this last week, really recognizing the presence of BYU in between Notre Dame and Miami gave the committee options. They love to have their options. They like to keep everything on the table, and they did with the last week's ranking. And with BYU, playing poorly enough, although they were a 2-touchdown underdog, playing poorly enough to drop down. Now you're side by side, and the committee chairman's going to say, that was Jay Black, by the way, of course we're going to count head-to-head now. We haven't been doing that the entire time, but of course we're going to. And I will say, I think there's an argument to be made for a lot here. You could argue against Alabama. You could argue for Notre Dame. You could argue for Alabama and against Notre Dame. You could do that. For me, and I'm no Miami fan, I do think the committee probably, the best that I can tell, got this right. And I'm someone who respects the power rankings and the various mathematically oriented rating services that had Notre Dame ahead of Miami. I'm respectful of that. I find that to be interesting. It's a data point worth considering. But I don't want it to be college football where all we do is just see whatever data the computer spits out and that becomes our boss. Hockey does it that way. You hear about the Frozen Four, the NCAA selection process for who makes the hockey tournament. That's data only. I don't want numbers to be the boss of me. I want humans to be able to look at those numbers and then make a human decision based on the mathematical data. And you can look at that and say, data says Notre Dame is better than Miami, but they have the same record. Miami did beat it. It still feels a little more human to put Miami in, even though the computers will tell you that Notre Dame is probably the better team. But I think in this case, the committee probably got that right. And if I had to make the choice between Notre Dame and Alabama, I think I probably would have chosen Notre Dame. But some of that's just, it would have been fun to end Alabama's season. But nonetheless, that is the story on that. So here's what's coming up this week. Obviously, we will continue to look back on what was a very special win to a lot of Georgia fans. And honestly, we're going to hear from some of the players this week and what Kirby Smart said. I wonder if this one does mean as much to the team as it does to fans. I really do. Every now and then there are things that maybe just mean more to the guys on the inside of the program. There may be some stuff every now and then that means a little more to the folks outside the program. I am curious to see, did this one mean more to Georgia fans than it did the Georgia players? And obviously it means a ton to them. They're putting their life on the line. But as Kirby Smart said coming into the game, they don't know the history the way all of us do. We're going to talk about what did this mean to the average Georgia fan to finally vanquish Alabama in a game in Atlanta. It felt, like retribution in so many ways. How did the players themselves see all that? And what is this path to the playoff for Georgia? To recap it, Georgia's the 3 seed. Could have moved up to number 2, but and Mike Griffith nailed this. If you are number 2, it probably was a slightly harder spot to be in. That I don't know, other than the cut lines, 4 compared to 5, 8 compared to 9, 12 compared to, or I should say 10 compared to out of the field. I don't know that there's a wild degree of difference in the seeding overall, but Georgia does get the 3. That means in the Sugar Bowl, it'll play the winner of a first-round game between Ole Miss and Tulane. Ole Miss has already beaten Tulane this year. Both schools are in the midst of losing their coaches. John Summerall going to Florida, Lane Kiffin already at LSU. If Georgia were to win the Sugar Bowl, it would get a chance to play, we believe, I guess the Fiesta Bowl we're saying, against the winner of Ohio State, who's waiting on the winner of the first-round matchup between Texas A&M and Miami. So in that case, we'll see what's left over on the other side, and Georgia could be right back in the national championship picture. But as we learned last year, in this 12-team era, nothing is easy. And it certainly wasn't easy for the Georgia Bulldogs last season, but they are going to give it another shot here this year and try to go on a deep run. Before we sign off, let me also give a big thanks to our friends at the UGA Bookstore. By the way, Georgia wins the SEC last night. You can go to the UGA Bookstore right now, and they've got the SEC championship shirts on hand. You can show them off. They look great. It's a great way to celebrate this great win for Georgia. You want to give somebody, here's the cool thing, because Georgia's one of the prestigious teams that doesn't have to play the playoffs until after Christmas. That means the SEC championship is still hot when you get to Christmas. So that hard to buy for Georgia fan on your shopping list this Christmas season, they would love to get an SEC championship shirt, and the best place to get them is right there at the UGA bookstore. So I hope you'll check that out. Just go see them in Athens. It's really a fun trip to take. It's right there next to the stadium. I always tell people this. You know, the west end zone on a non-game day is open. So you can walk right there onto the plaza. It's a wonderful picture spot. Now, if you try to do some tomfoolery, you're going to have alarms going off and things like that. But if it's just a chance to take pictures, you can walk out there and take a picture. And it's really, honestly, Georgia did not have to do this. It's just a nice thing. So if you go to the UGA bookstore, you can step out on the plaza in the west end zone, get a beautiful picture of yourself there at Sanford Stadium, and get the best-looking UGA apparel you're going to find anywhere. UGA bookstore's got all the famous makers, Peter Millar, Johnny O, Onward Reserve. And by the way, for a playoff run, you want to look your Sunday best for this playoff run. So great way to do that. It's the UGA bookstore, but they've also got the SEC championship stuff too, so you can get stocked up on that. All right, we're going to go because it's a Sunday, and we got people working very hard. So to Kamal and Mackenzie, who've been here today, thank you so much. Jay Black, who's pretty much here all the time, around the clock, I appreciate him too. But most of all, I appreciate all of you. You have no idea what a privilege it is for me to be able to narrate this experience of a Georgia program that's never been better, still very much in the prime of its tenure here atop the world of college football, back in the playoff again as a back-to-back SEC champion with a trip to New Orleans coming up. And my, oh my, all kinds of fun chatter. We're going to do so much of this in the days to come, and as a part of some of these postseason specials here too on video as well. So stay close to DawgNation throughout this Christmas season as we roll towards January. Have a great Sunday, everybody.